back to the CivicSciTV Newsroom. I'm your host, Jake Krause, reporting to you from Colorado on the latest civic science news and research, now with a focus on the environment. The UN Biodiversity Conference COP16 in Colombia aimed to advance global conservation, but ended without resolving key financial issues. A major achievement was creating a permanent body to include indigenous voices in decision-making and launching the Kali Fund to share benefits from genetic resources. However, disagreements over funding led to stalled negotiations, postponing it until 2025. In a follow-up session in Rome, delegates committed in mobilizing $200 billion annually for biodiversity by 2030. But financial challenges remain. While progress was made, the lack of consensus on funding highlights ongoing struggles in global conservation efforts. The Pulitzer Center's Story Reach U.S. Fellowships offer a 12-month part-time program providing up to $30,000 in funding for journalists to pursue in-depth reporting projects, coupled with innovative audience engagement strategies. The fellowship emphasizes topics such as health, marine fisheries, human rights, and climate-related labor issues. Fellows receive support through monthly virtual meetings, peer collaboration, and access to data and research resources. The program aims to enhance the reach and impact of underreported stories across the U.S. Applications are due May 1st. At the 2024 European Meteorological Society annual meeting, a workshop was held to help climate scientists enhance their communication skills. Experts from neuroscience, communication, activism, and journalism shared strategies to raise awareness of the climate crisis. Key takeaways include the importance of dialogue to recognize expertise and perspectives of the audience, understanding cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance, and crafting compelling research-based narratives and collaborating with communication professionals. These insights aim to empower climate scientists to engage the public more effectively and drive meaningful action. Thanks so much for watching this week's Civic Science News Roundup. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on the latest news and opportunities in civic science. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.
Did you know that the Sloan Foundation supports authors in the research and writing of a wide range of books aimed at the public understanding of science and technology? Well, they do, and if you did go through the grants database, you'll find lots of previous books that they have funded. Now, I wondered, how do you get a grant like that? So I reached out to one of the authors that received such a grant, Jennifer Frazier, and asked her, well, a few questions. Well, okay, more than a few questions. What did she pitch? How many times was she rejected? What role did translation, perseverance, and unexpected deadlines play? Join me as we explore Jennifer's journey in the process of getting funded for a Sloan Foundation book titled The Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination. Yes, you heard me right. You don't want to miss this conversation. Mapping the ongoing work across the civic science landscape by characterizing the why, what, how, who, when, and where through talking directly with practitioners in academia, government, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. I'm Faniel Mwindi, and this is Questions of the Day. Previously on Questions of the Day.
So the idea behind this project is to basically talk to basic scientists, which is wonderful because they do a lot of really cool stuff. So it'd be very fun to talk to them. But specifically basic scientists who are trying to incorporate this sort of ethical dimension into their work, the folks who are thinking about this kind of stuff in terms of, what might the downstream impacts of my science, what might those impacts be? Not only just in terms of like what I find out, what I publish, what comes of the work that I'm doing, but even in terms of the process of the research itself, the questions that are being asked, how the data is being collected and analyzed, what materials are being used, as we know, like there are basic scientists out there in the world who are thinking about these things and attempting to grapple with them. What we're really interested to do is find them, talk to them, write up case studies about how they're approaching this, how they're seeking to learn more about the ethical implications, how they figure out in the first place whether there might be ethical implications of their research, and then also how they're taking these insights that they find out through whichever approach they take, and how they're bringing it back to their research.
Subscribe to access that conversation and many more.
Jennifer Frazier, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So can you just take us back to the genesis of the Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination? How did this idea come about?
Well, I was in graduate school in plant pathology, which is the study of plant diseases, and which I had picked because really as a stalling tactic, because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life yet. I had realized that I didn't want to be a lab scientist because I didn't want to spend decades studying effectively one topic. I needed more variety in my work life. And I picked plant pathology because there's a whole lot of weird little things that attack plants. And I was very interested in these weird little things. Their diversity, their beauty, their life cycles, how they go about approaching the world in ways that are wildly different from other life forms. And while I was in graduate school, a very famous paper by a Japanese scientist named Toshiyuki Nakagaki came out. And it basically showed that slime about in grad school because for a long time, people thought they were fungi, and fungi attack plants. So they were kind of adopted by mycologists. And his paper showed that slime molds could solve mazes. And that exploded my mind. I think it exploded a lot of other people's minds because slime molds are giant crawling cells. One cell that is so big that you can see it and touch it and even smell it. Like people think they have pretty nice smells, believe it or not. And I was just fascinated by this. I thought at the time, I want to write a book about this one day. And I think it was then that I even came up with the title that I now have, The Slime Mold's Guide to World Domination. But I knew that if I was going to become a book author, I had a lot of prep work to do because you can't just graduate from grad school and go write books, right? You have to pay dues as a writer and get experience as a writer. So after I finished grad school 1, I enrolled in grad school 2 for science writing. I got a master's degree in science writing. And then I went off to pay my dues by becoming a newspaper reporter. I worked as a health and environment reporter at a newspaper in Wyoming. And then I took a job as a science writer for the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And then I started a blog that was ultimately picked up by Scientific American. Mm-hmm. And I spent 9 years writing that blog. And what was really great about it was it gave me the opportunity to practice ingesting scientific journal articles and then writing about them in an entertaining fashion in my own voice. And having a strong voice is one of the things I think book publishers most look for. They really value authors that have a unique voice that readers are drawn to. So I got a lot of practice building the skills I would need to write books while I was writing that blog. And then I did that for 9 years and they closed the blog network. And that was kind of the universe kicking me in the pants and saying, okay, time to write that book. So I started working on the book proposal. Actually, I had been working on the book proposal, but this gave me the impetus to finish it. And here we are.
Wow. So it's been years in the making,
Decades.
Literally. So grad school 2, I want to go to that. So this was at MIT, the graduate program in science writing. Tell us why you decided to go there.
Well, they had just started the program back when I was in grad school, and I was in the second class. And I think I applied. Did I apply anywhere else? No, I think I just applied to that one. Just thinking, well, I'll give this a try. I think I knew, I had a friend who was in grad school at MIT already in biology. And so that was appealing to me because there was someone I knew who was already there. And I applied and got in. I had already done I think it was while I was waiting to hear from them, I had got an internship at Harvard Medical School working for one of their in-school sort of publications. And so I was already in Boston, and that made things easy. I just stayed over the summer and then started school in the fall.
Yeah. So, these ideas, they take a while to marinate, and finally actually having ideas on paper, right? It's a whole process. I was wondering if you can just walk us through that. So you started writing, the proposal started coming together, right? Because the process is you write this proposal, you submit it to a few agents, actually, right? And so just tell us about that. Like what happened in that as things started to take shape on paper?
So I was terrified of writing a book. Even though I wanted to write a book and I knew I wanted to write a book, I was just like, I don't know how to write a book. No one ever taught me how to write a book, even in grad school, right? Like at MIT, we learned how to, write newspaper articles and magazine articles. But like a book is just so much more than that, that like it was only a 1-year program. There's just not time to really talk about how to write a book. And I've always been one of those people who's like, I want to know every step before I start this process so I can be sure I can do it exactly right. And that there was just pure terror. And I kept putting off writing the proposal because of this fear. Even though once I got my blog at Scientific American, I had agents coming to me and being like, do you have any book ideas? And I was like, well, actually,
so they were coming to you at that time, at least. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I think there's a real thirst in the publishing industry for people who are qualified to write science books. There just aren't that many. And so if you have those skills, that is a commodity that they are looking for. So the other problem was I did acquire an agent when I first started the blog, and I did start working on a proposal at that time. But that agent and I didn't quite have meshing visions for the book. Every agent has like a stable of editors that they work with, and they know what those editors are looking for, and they want proposals that will, make those editors excited. And I think what I had in mind for the book just wasn't quite fitting with that. So I put it off and I put it on the back burner for like 5 years. And I had a friend who works in science communication as an instructor and teacher. And he said, you're established enough as a science writer. You should just start writing the book. And like, you should write until you feel confident enough that you can finish it and then get the proposal and the contract together. And that was like my little magic Dumbo feather that I needed to like, because let me tell you, signing a book contract, another moment of pure terror, because like you've signed on the dotted line and like you've said you're going to deliver X by X date, and you have no idea exactly how you're going to get there or do it in time, So by the time I got around to finishing the proposal, I had written 2 whole chapters. And I could kind of see like, oh, I think I know what I'm doing now, or at least I know what I'm doing enough to like finish this book. So at that point, I reapproached my agent with the 2 chapters. It took a month to get back to me and let me know she wasn't interested. Again, different visions. Then I moved on to another agent, did the same thing. She was interested, took another month to get back to me, and then told me she wasn't interested. And at this point, I realized it was a mistake to approach one agent at a time. Major pro tip here. Approach 3 to 5 agents at a time, because if one of them gets back to you with a yes, it kind of like helps the others move a little faster, And then I went to agents 3, 4, and 5 and got 2 more no's and a yes. It was actually agent 3 that finally told me yes. And I had the 2 sample chapters ready to go. And then we worked together to do the rest of the parts of the proposal. And then he shopped it to editors.
Wow. So perseverance, I think, is order of the day. I'm curious, Jennifer, did you engage others, like in terms of scientists or potential audiences that where your target audiences, right, that are going to read the book. Did you do this part in writing the proposal, and what were they telling you that kind of gave you even a boost, perhaps, right, to say, I'm going to write this proposal and submit it to these agents?
In terms of, what do you mean by in terms of audiences? Like,
So, like, who's the target audience for the book, and some other ways to frame the
yes,
question, and did you talk to
right, right.
them in that writing process? During that?
So for a science book, the audience is the repeat science book buyer. That is the audience that you need to primarily target, because those are the people that buy most of the science books. But even from the very beginning, I knew I wanted to focus on way more than just the repeat science book buyer. I wanted to reach basically anyone with any curiosity, from bright teenagers on. When I was writing the sample chapters and the whole book, really, and the proposal, I tried to write it in a way that the people who had biology degrees wouldn't be bored by long passages of information they already know. Because I've read science books like that. I'm like, I already know this. Why are you wasting my time? But I also wanted to write it in a way that people who don't have science degrees wouldn't feel lost or left behind. So I was very conscious about writing everything that way from the very beginning.
I see. Because part of the challenge, I think, is who's your target audience, right? And nowadays, it's difficult. As people are, I think, is if you don't have a target audience, it kind of makes it very difficult to sort of get down to an audience. So I want to go back to you getting all these no's at the beginning, at least, right, from book agents until that final list. I mean, was there a point in time where you thought, okay, maybe this is not a good idea, and I should I should change
Yes.
my approach, or like what
Yes,
how
there
do how
were
do
definitely moments
uh-huh.
like that.
Yeah, tell us about one or two of them.
There were, when the Scientific American Blog Network closed down, there was definitely a moment there where I thought, is science writing even for me? Like, I legitimately considered becoming a native plant landscaper at that point. And there were previous points in my career when I left my newspaper job where I thought maybe I should be a nurse, like something that pays a stable, high income that, uses science skills. But in the agent process, yeah, there were, I think I definitely had a good cry after the second agent told me no, because she had pointed out something in my proposal that needed a fix. And rightly so, she had asked me, well, what's the engine of your book? Because I just thought I was going to write a straight up natural history in the beginning. And I thought about it. I thought, she's right. This needs an engine. Let's make it a mystery. Let's frame it as this deep question, like, how can a giant crawling cell possibly be intelligent? And then let's look at its natural history to look for clues, and then solve it to the extent we can at the end of the book. And I came back to her with this idea, all excited, like, I had this great idea. This is how we can do it. And she still said no after all that. And I was just like, oh my God, this is 2 in a row. But I still wasn't ready to give up, because, this is 2 no's in the world of fiction. That's like nothing. I mean, if you talk to the fiction authors, they go through dozens of agents before they get a yes. So, like, I was gonna hang in there at least for 10 or 15 agents before I gave up.
So you really need a thick skin, right? A thick skin
You
in this
do,
game
but I mean, that's part of a writer, right? Like,
right.
to pitch articles, I have a sign on my wall that says embrace rejection. And I think you have to have a little bit of a startup mentality with the rejection thing, because getting rejected is a sign that you tried, and trying is the way to succeed. So it's hard. I try not to take it personally, but it is part of the deal when you're a writer.
Yeah. So fast forward, you get the yes, right? The agent is interested. Now the next step, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to now shop it around to a publisher, right? So tell us about that part.
Yeah, exactly. So most writers who become authors will tell you the hardest part is getting an agent, because the agent won't say yes unless they know editors they're pretty sure they can sell it to. So once you have an agent, it's a good sign that you're probably going to sell the book, because they don't want to invest in energy in a project that isn't likely to sell. So I wrote the proposal. It didn't take, God, the proposal, it'd been such this huge thing in my mind, so scary. And then once I actually sat down to write it, it only took like 3 or 4 weeks and I was done. And then we edited on it for like a month. And then we shopped it, I think it was mid-January. And I had an editor already interested 2 days after he put it out for submission. That's a good sign when they get back that quickly. He had sent it to, my agent had sent it to 3 editors, and ultimately 2 of them ended up making bids. And one of them offered me a preempt, which I was pretty excited about. A preempt is where an editor says, I will give you more money to take it off the table so it doesn't go to auction, where they have to compete. I ultimately decided to go to auction, and the first editor who had responded within 2 days was the one who ultimately won.
I see.
And
I see.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, again, these are wonderful details. Like, to just know the intricate details behind the scenes, right, leading up to actually the writing. So you at this point you have the 2 chapters, right? Because you submitted the sample chapters. You have a agent. You have now a publisher in mind, but you didn't stop there. You kept going, right? You actually then sought out, and tell me how this kind of came about. You found the Sloan Foundation, and there was of course, they have this book proposal grant that they have. How did you find the Sloan Foundation opportunity, and tell us about that process?
Yeah, this is something I really want other people to know about, because I didn't know about it. And neither my editor and my agent didn't tell me about it either, even though they knew I had some financial needs regarding this book. So one of the things I knew was going to be an issue from the beginning was that I needed a Japanese translator, I needed a German translator, and later on I found out I also needed Latin and Polish. And where is the money for that going to come from? Like, when you get a book advance, they only give you a quarter of it up front, which doesn't end up being much. And then on top of that, my husband was out of work at the time, and we just needed some money to live on. So I ended up finding out about it because I joined a science writing book group where it's called Authors of Nonfiction Books in Progress. And we meet up once a month to kind of talk about where we are in our book process and share wisdom and advice. And the organizer of the group mentioned it at a meeting, and I was just like, what? Because I needed money to help support my book, and here was potentially $50,000 to help me write this book and pay for my translations. But I was already like, well into the process when that happened. So it ended up being not as big of a roadblock as I thought it was when I first found out about it. But the Sloan process is long. It ended up taking 9 months from the time that I started working on the application until when I finally got an answer. So my biggest advice to people is to start early and take your time. It's a long application, and it requires a lot of supporting materials. And there's a lot of steps in the process. So if Sloan doesn't respond to you by, a posted deadline where they say they will, then be polite and persistent in following up with them. And my other piece of advice is, if you know someone who has won a Sloan Award or admire someone who's won a Sloan Award, reach out to them and ask them for advice. That was another piece of advice I got in the book group, and it was excellent advice.
Yeah, and you're giving it right now too, right? To those others that are going to be listening to this, the scientists who may be interested, right, writing these books like this.
Totally.
So you mentioned 9 months, Jennifer. 9 months. You are persevering through all sorts of things here. How did you persevere for 9 months, and what did they need, by the way, if you can just quickly share those requirements?
So there's a lot of forms you have to fill out that have to do with, where the money goes. If you win it, you have to write a budget. You have to submit your book proposal, and then I think you have to write a statement of interest and some other. There's a lot. Yeah. And this is why it really helps to reach out to talk to people who've done it before, because they can kind of coach ins and outs.
And we'll share the link down below as well for people, because they do.
Yeah,
They do
you also
several
need to
pieces.
submit articles that you've previously published work, which is where it helps to have experience as a science writer or a published author in some capacity. And then I believe I submitted a sample chapter as well. It ended up being something like 60 or 70 pages. It's a lot.
Yeah. And at this time again, are you writing the book at this point in time also, because the book has to keep moving forward, right? I was wondering
I
if you
think
can
I took
share.
a month out of writing the book to deal with the Sloan
Mm,
application.
I see.
But
I see.
in my head, I was thinking, if I get this, it's $50,000. That's pretty good pay for a month. So
And so if you didn't get the grant, would that have impeded the book? Just give us that sense.
it would not have. It definitely would not helped, because I would have had to pay for those translations out of my own pocket,
Mm,
and we would have been cutting that much closer to the bone to survive, with our living expenses, because as I said, 1/4 of my book advance wasn't a lot. We were already living on savings at the time. It would have been doable, but winning the Sloan grant was such a psychological boost. And it really did help me feel like I was contributing to feeding my family and, earning the ability to write my book. So, and obviously, it brought me to you. I think that's how you found out about my book too. So there's other intangibles that come with winning a Sloan.
Yeah. So you mentioned translation. Just tell us a little bit about that. The what translation for what exactly?
So the guy who I mentioned who did the slime mold maze solving experiment, Toshiyuki Nakagaki, he speaks English, but not well, which I don't speak Japanese. So like, even a little bit of English is great. But in order to get the kind of quotes that I wanted for a high quality narrative nonfiction book, I knew that I would prefer if I could interview him in Japanese, if he could give me his answers in Japanese, and then have them translated professionally back into English. And I didn't quite know how to make that work until someone suggested, why don't you just do it in writing? Because that will give him time to think through everything. That is not usually done in journalism, but I thought that given the extenuating circumstances and the language barrier, that it was appropriate for this situation, because it also enabled my translators to take their time and have like the printed document with the kanji that they could review and translate to the best of their ability. So the Japanese was done in writing, from questions I had translated into Japanese and emailed him.
I see. So you get this grant in 2024, I believe, right? The beginning, the end. Tell us when in 2024 did you get this?
I found out at the end of February.
End of
And then I
February.
think I got the first payment in May.
I see. So it's in process right now, because there's no. It's unclear if there's a time limit. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? What's the time frame?
You do have to put dates on your proposal of like when you propose to use the money and over what time period. This is all part of the whole budget process. But they are not, as far as I can tell, as long as you're working hard and making progress, you have, excuse me, you do have to submit an interim report and tell them where you are in the book writing. Excuse me. And, if you don't quite make the time frame that you originally gave them, I don't think they're going to kick you out and demand their money back. So I'm just trying to work on the book as fast as I can.
Yeah. So tell us where you are right now in that process with the book.
I am on the next to last chapter. I'm getting towards the end of the next to last chapter. This chapter has been the biggest challenge of any of the chapters I've written so far, because it is the beginning of the solution to the mystery that I set up at the beginning. And this particular chapter, unlike any of the other chapters in the book, could be its own book. So I'm having to comb through the amount of material that I would be doing, that I would need to look through for a book, but condense that down into just a chapter, because I'm not writing that book. I'm writing the slime mold book. So that has been quite difficult, and it's taken me longer than any of the previous chapters have taken. But I'm nearing the end of that process, and when I finish this current chapter, I will only have one to go. And that feels kind of amazing after, 2 years now? I've been working on this since I got the contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's the finish line is getting close, right?
Yes, the light at the end of the tunnel is becoming more visible, although I try not to think about it that way. I live in Colorado, and one of the things I like to do is climb mountains. And if you've ever climbed a mountain, you know that false summits are a thing where you're like, oh, there's the top. And then you get to the thing you thought was the top, and you discover you have another 1,000 feet to go. So I've tried very hard to just focus on one day at a time. And like today, I will take the next step and trust that if I keep taking next steps, eventually I'll get to the top.
Yeah. Now, you've been sharing a lot of advice, Jennifer, to other aspiring science writers. If you were, I want to focus on those like science writers, freelance science writers out there, and there's quite a few of them, many of whom you probably know. Through what advice would you give them through this process of yours, right? You mentioned there are these grants that are out there, right? And I think Sloan is rather unique in having this targeted amount like this, right? Other foundations, maybe you have to kind of dig around and see if a book will be a project, right? And then the perseverance you talked about earlier. I mean, goodness me, you have layers of skin here, and there's some things we didn't discuss also that you've gone through before, having a child, right? Earlier on. What advice comes to the top of your mind right now as you reflect on your experiences so far writing this book?
Yeah, I really want to encourage all science writers to consider writing a book. There is a great thirst for science books, and there aren't enough people to write them who are qualified. So I want you to think about it. Even if you don't know how to write the book, consider it seriously. And, if you're having trouble, just start writing and see how you like it and see how far you get. That was probably the best piece of advice I got. And I don't think I would be here sitting here talking to you today if I had not done that first. I needed to believe. So get to the point where you can believe. And then the second thing I would say is make sure that you have a topic that you're utterly passionate about, because to persist for years on a project, you need to really be jazzed about whatever it is you want to write your book about. So if you have something that you're just kind of like, well, this is kind of cool, that is not enough. It has to be something that you're just like, the world has to know about this, and I am the person to tell them. And then the second thing is educate yourself about writing nonfiction books. Read a book about how to write a nonfiction book. The one that I really like is called Thinking Like Your Editor. But there are others out there. The other thing is read nonfiction books. I've kind of been amazed by how many other science writers I've talked to who've written books that didn't read other nonfiction books. Like, I wanted to know, what is it that I love and what is it that I hate? And the best way to do that is to read nonfiction and find out how you react to the material. And if you read something that you think is great, ask yourself, why do I think this is great? The last thing is go to Goodreads and look up books that you either love or hate and read the 2- and 3-star reviews, because I almost think that has been my best teacher is hearing what people are complaining about when they read nonfiction books. I have a folder, a Word doc full of these like pieces of advice that readers have given about things that really ticked them off that book authors have done. Free advice. So
lots of free advice. And Jennifer, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the AI, right? That is out there, especially you mentioned start writing. I mean, AI is helping in that part as well. What are your thoughts around that and its utility here for authors, book authors in this case?
I speak only for myself. I avoid it like the plague. Okay. I don't want it infecting my voice. My voice is the most valuable thing I own. It's what makes me unique. It's what makes me human. I think it will be what draws people to read me as opposed to anyone else. And I also don't want it to handicap my skills. I feel like once you start relying on a crutch, you get used to the crutch and your brain stops exercising itself and, weakens. I think there's some evidence out there that already suggests that this happens with AI among students. And I almost put it like I have a religious objection to AI. I also don't like the fact that they built it on stolen authors' works, and I think that's wrong. You know, you need to offer compensation and you need to get permission. So I have a lot of reasons for avoiding it, but I don't use it and I never will.
Yeah. And in your Substack, I think you put in no AI training, right? Kind of like a notice at the top there without permission, right? For example.
You know, and everyone's free to come to their own conclusions. That's just mine.
Of course. So if you were talking to your target audience, Jennifer, and my last question here, the book is out, let's say the future, now, pitch them the book, kind of like why should they go ahead and buy it or check it out? So what would you tell them?
So if you want to laugh and you want to read a really interesting mystery about slime molds, then you should buy this book. Because even though I knew when I started to write this book, I've still been blown away by all the extraordinary, you know, abilities that slime molds have that were buried in the archive and I dug up. So, you know, if you like to laugh, if you like surprises, if you like a mystery, you should buy this book.
Jennifer, we'll look to having you back when the book is out, because we would love to talk to you some more. We barely scratched the surface here. So thank you for sharing these insights.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me.
Hi there, this is Fanuel Mwindi, and this is your CivicSciTV Network briefing. So in Malden, we've been talking with artists participating in the city's art exhibit titled Our Warming Planet, Visions of a Sustainable Future. The exhibit opened on March 7th, and the mayor of Malden told us this.
So you said earlier that the artwork is inspiring you guys. Tell us, how has it inspired you so far? Well, I've always felt since being mayor that everything comes from within. And that's exactly how it's happened here when it comes to climate action. Honestly, it was not on our radar 10 years ago, but thanks to everyone here tonight and out in the community, now it is.
Catch the rest of that interview on CivicSciTV. In other network news, Claire O'Neill, founder of Earthwise Aware, that's based in Massachusetts, told CivicSciTV Emma Subisky that her organization is fostering conversations between scientists and naturalists. O'Neill notes that Earthwise Aware is not just about collecting data, it's about fostering an ecological culture. She goes on to state, and I quote, "We believe that meaningful conversations begin with a deeper understanding of our surroundings and our role in them," end quote. On CivicSciTV Radio, Atlanta science communicator Zakia Watley, host of Dope Labs and The Breakthrough, discusses the power of understanding your audience. Dr. Watley shares her audience-first approach to making complex scientific concepts accessible without sacrificing accuracy. Have a listen.
I think sometimes when I consider audience, one of my favorite things to tell people is if I'm in the South, I'm saying toboggan. If I am in the North, I'm saying beanie. Okay, and that's for a hat. And I just think there are small things that tell people that signal like this person is a part of my group, or this person maybe understands my experience and they are speaking to me. And so a lot of that looks different. I think when I first started Dope Labs, I was just moving out of a tenure track position and into managing a PhD program where I'm using a lot of academic lingo and I'm talking about molecular biology all the time. And I want to turn that teacher voice or that professor voice off. And on Dope Labs, I want it to feel casual. I want people to feel like they're sitting on the couch with me, talking to my friend, because that's actually what we were doing when we were recording.
Catch the rest of that interview on CivicSciTV. And on CivicSciTV Africa, Amanda Obedike of STEMI Makers Africa and Justin Yarrow of Super Scientists talk with host Stephanie Okeo about the joint collaboration that resulted in the launch of SciComm in Practice Fellowship. They mentioned in the conversation that the overwhelming response to the fellowship, over 400 applications, showed a huge demand for structured science communication training. Have a listen.
From the beginning to the application, we had overwhelming number of people that were very, very enthusiastic and were very willing to being part of the fellowship. So in short is the SciComm in practice, the name came in, and we tried to see how we could just pen it as a signature name, and it was a very, very good experience. It's something that we started in the month of between August, September, and we rounded off. So we had fellows that we categorized as core fellows and associate fellows. Fellows were like the young ones that didn't really have so much work doing in the science communication space, while we had associate fellows that we found out that they had quite a lot of amazing work, or they had their own existing initiatives.
And on my own program, Questions of the Day, I talked with Aubrey Straight-Crude, the director of the Perennial Cultures Lab at the Land Institute, who told me that the civic scientist dedication they have been witnessing through the Perennial Atlas project, which involves local communities, is especially inspiring, even when the results aren't as expected. Take a listen.
An interesting aspect of this agricultural hands-on civic science work is that because we're studying perennials, we're looking at plants that live for multiple years. That's the benefit of what we're trying to do here. But that means that it's really valuable for our civic scientists to participate for multiple growing seasons. So it's a big ask for people to join a project, not just one time to collect data and send it in and that's that, but to monitor and steward and care for a research plot for several years in a row.
And this week, the organization inspiring us is Trend in Africa, a charity supporting scientific capacity building across Africa. The community engagement program run by African scientists has engaged thousands of members of public. Do check them out. And that's your CivicSciTV Network briefing for this week. Explore those insights and many others by visiting our terminal on CivicSciTV.org. See you next time.
Why do stakeholders choose the CivicSciTV Network?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, great question.
That's a good one.
That's a great question.
CivicSciTV. Top experts, great questions, new insights. Subscribe to the CivicSciTV Network on YouTube and don't miss new insights from diverse stakeholders.
Western liberal democracies are moving too slow and science in the 21st century today is moving too fast, or vice versa? Or how can we move in tandem and in parallel?
All right, Dave, the speed of science and the slowness of democracy.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting question. I think within each of these categories, there's a whole range of speeds. So let me just talk about sort of scientific research. In many ways, I agree with you. There's a kind of just overwhelming flood of new preprints, and many get peer-reviewed and published, and then they'll be dealt with the community. It's a minute-by-minute affair. It's not that you can sit around and wait for a month and then go catch up. Right? It's overwhelming. I literally used to have nightmares about what's going to be waiting for me the next morning that I'm going to try to just kind of triage. Right? That pace is exciting, but sometimes also overwhelming. On the other hand, many of the institutions in which we conduct our scientific research are extremely slow to change. Maybe that's in some ways a source of strength. I wouldn't want every university to be changing on the dime. I think sometimes slowness can be very frustrating to those of us who live in them, right, who work in them. But also, I think every now and then, thank goodness this is a ship that's slow to turn. It's not perfect. I wish I had a magic wand for a lot of things. But there's a kind of resiliency built in, at least to some of these kinds of institutions, because they actually do change achingly slowly. And sometimes maybe that's okay. So even just within the science side, let alone the kind of democracy, and I guess they're really not so separated after all, I see a range of different timescales. And now the question is, can we think about good strategies to intervene, to make changes here, knowing that we might not change that over there, right? Can we think about trying to do more than one thing that's going to take different kinds of timescales to enact the changes we're hoping for? That's very abstract. We could go into a case by case, but that's where I'm often struck by by the kind of half-century timescale for universities to kind of budge compared to this, oh my God, last night 15 new articles, just my subfield were posted, to this reputable preprint server. We live among each of these kinds of temporalities.
Let me extend the question just a little bit, because the pace of technological change for something like AI, or the pace of technological change like for genetic engineering, these things are happening very quickly. The public wants to regulate in some way. Do we have the expertise to do so? I wonder from a political standpoint, maybe we'll start with you, Dave, but I'd like you both to address this, which is how can the public kind of have some sort of reasonable participation in the ordering of science so that it actually counts for goodness rather than just for corporate gain or for something that we have. So let's start with you, Danielle, and then we'll go over, because I think it relates to this question.
Sure. So, yes, I mean, I think we're all struggling with a kind of a temporality, misalignment, whether that's between the speed of developments in generative foundation models versus the pace at which regulators can understand and think about that, or how universities work and the like. It can be nice to go back and think about other cases. So take automobiles, for instance. Automobiles, when they were first created, didn't have brakes. Think about that. Driving a car without brakes, not a very appealing prospect, right? And it took decades, which is kind of crazy, for brakes to become required as a matter of regulation in cars. But once brakes were required, cars could go a lot faster, because now you don't mind driving a car at a certain speed if you can actually brake the thing. So the point is that once people recognized that safety in automobiles was going to be beneficial to innovation, then the processes, the technological process and the democratic process, started to get in sync with each other. And I think that's the kind of moment that we're in right now, where we have to recognize that a certain amount of safety built into AI development will actually help innovation. And if we can bring those sort of values into alignment, safety and innovation values, that's when you sort of get your temporalities reconnected to each other. So I think that's what we're working on right now.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree with Danielle, and it is a great question. On this topic of AI and let's say the broader penumbra of, let's say, computing in societies, not only AI, but includes things like social media. One of the things I'm continually amazed and actually very upset about, not only such a muscular optimism after all, is the many decades failure to even try to begin to formulate basic common sense regulations within this country, and not only within this country, about that large, incredibly impactful sector. And Daniel, I like your example, if I put my historian's cap on as well. Every version that I can think of that we might call kind of communications technologies, going back a long, long ways, has been subject before, quicker than the breaks, within some reasonable amount of time, at least within this country, to some form of imperfect, to be modified, try it and we'll change it later, regulation, state, federal, and so on. That no one said you'll squelch every possible version of innovation if you regulate anything ever. That was not a winning argument. It shouldn't have been a winning argument. It was not a winning argument for any technology that I can think of. Certainly one that has the kind of impact among many, many people every day that this collection of things do now. So I find this frankly an outrageous failure, and that's one that I don't have an answer for. But I think this is actually different from the historical examples that otherwise I come back to.
The SDGs, the Agenda 2030, remains in place as a global framework that rallies, that at least when you're working in global science policy, is your kind of go-to framework for chasing impact. Let me not talk about the impact it's had on science, but just say it has increased the mandate for science, the recognition that science has to be part of not only developing these kinds of global frameworks, but also achieving their implementation, but that it can't do that on its own. It's not the silver bullet, but it has a position and a place. And you will see all sorts of new structures since 2016 that have been put in place, particularly within the UN system, where we as scientists can speak and participate, advise, etc. The response from the global scientific community has been across the board. So in terms of research strategies, research performance, you see individual institutions from all over the world, universities, academies, talking about the SDGs and their strategies. It's a cornerstone. We are ranking our universities and institutions according to how we do on meeting the SDGs. It's a new impact ranking. When it comes to research approaches, in other words, how do we amplify our impact as research communities, we've looked at, probably the most prominent approach has been this huge emphasis on transdisciplinary research, where academics and non-academics engage as knowledge partners in solving particular global challenges. When it comes to bigger research policy frameworks, we've seen the emergence in the last 10 years of the open science paradigm, also about science for the future, future of science, right? Sharing, collaborating, and don't forget one of the SDGs, SDG 17, is all about partnerships. In terms of research support, we've seen the global funding community rallying around the SDGs because it's a universal agenda or posed as a universal agenda, which gives us a common purpose. Funders have been able to collaborate with each other in jointly funding SDG-related research in ways that we've never seen in the past, where they're actually putting money together into common pools and you know, at a global level, initiating funding instruments for SDG sustainability science. We've seen the science diplomacy and science advisory community rallying around this. Different story. And I can talk from experience at the global level, the International Science Council, one of the things that has always come up in discussions about impact is, oh, but scientists can't communicate. So we've had workshops, trainings, discussions about the importance of really understanding how we communicate our science. And all of this has led to, across the globe, nationally, regionally, globally, you've seen new networks, new initiatives, new communities of practice emerging in all these fields. Transdisciplinary Alliance, community of practice around communicating basic science, etc., etc. So the question we have to ask ourselves, we've done a lot. How have we progressed? And we all know that we're not making progress on meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. We're in serious crisis. The time of optimism is gone. The latest Global Sustainable Development Report, which is prepared annually by a group of international scientists appointed by the Secretary General, their last report is called Times of Crisis, Times of Change.
FOI, or Freedom of Information, is a fundamental right recognized by the United Nations, essential for ensuring government transparency and democratic accountability. It grants citizens and civil society the right to access government-held information while obligating public officials to disclose it. FOI plays a vital role in investigative journalism, helping to expose corruption, inform the public, and safeguard democracy. For these reasons, over the last decades, FOI laws have been increasingly adopted worldwide by governments. However, a persistent gap exists between the formal adoption of FOI laws and their actual implementation, with governments frequently failing to meet their legal obligations. In 2022, a team of researchers and transparency activists in Belgium launched a field experiment to assess the actual implementation of FOI laws across Belgian municipal governments. They enlisted 36 public policy and administration students from ULB University of Brussels to submit FOI requests to all 581 Belgian municipalities. The objective was to examine the extent to which Belgian municipal governments respond to FOI requests. In this study, FOI requests were submitted using 3 distinct profiles to evaluate municipal officers' discretion in responding. The research team and the 36 students submitted requests to all 581 Belgian municipalities, seeking the explanatory note of the agenda from the last municipal council meeting along with its annexes. The results show that approximately 36% of municipalities, regardless of the requester profile, did not respond. This suggests that a significant portion of municipalities are not compliant with existing FOI laws. Results also show that about 34% of municipalities provided an unsatisfactory or partial reply, suggesting that while many municipalities acknowledge FOI requests, they do not always provide the requested information in full. The results further indicate that larger municipalities tend to be more responsive and transparent than smaller ones. In addition, regional variations in municipalities' responsiveness to FOI requests were observed, possibly due to differences in the interpretation and enforcement of FOI laws across regions or varying levels of administrative effectiveness in implementing the law. Moreover, municipalities were less responsive to requests from individuals perceived as knowledgeable about transparency policies, such as a university professor or an advocacy organization, compared to common citizens. Such administrative reluctance to respond to FOI requests from the most knowledgeable individuals is problematic, as it can limit the ability of those best equipped to expose corruption, inform the public, and protect democracy. This experiment highlights that the formal adoption of FOI laws alone does not guarantee administrative responsiveness in practice. The effective implementation of existing FOI laws requires a stronger administrative culture of transparency and openness, especially in the current era of rising populism and misinformation.
Did you know there are students all over Massachusetts who are collecting data to track the impact of climate change? I recently learned about the Harvard Forest Schoolyard Ecology Program, which was created in 2004 by a group of ecologists at the Harvard Forest in Petersham, Massachusetts. These ecologists decided that there was no better way to engage K-12 students in the scientific process than to have them actually be a part of it. So they developed the Schoolyard Ecology Program, which allows students and teachers to do the same type of research projects ecologists are conducting at Harvard Forest, but in their own schoolyards. There are many ongoing research projects within the Schoolyard Ecology Program, but the most popular is the Bud Leaves and Global Warming Project. For this, all that's needed is access to a deciduous tree, meaning a tree that sheds its leaves in the winter. Teachers and students select certain study trees in their schoolyard and make observations throughout the year. The students can track things like when the leaves change color, when the leaves drop, when buds appear, and when buds burst. And the following school year, a new class of students can continue studying the exact same study trees. Currently, about 88 schools are participating in the schoolyard ecology program. It started with schools in Massachusetts, but it's now grown to include classrooms all over the Northeast. There are even classrooms in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and in Georgia. The data that these students is collecting is really valuable because it's coming in from many different regional locations and documents environments over many years, which is useful for studying things like the impact of climate change on local ecosystems, since that type of change can be gradual, and we get a better picture of it the more years of data we have collected. So all in all, students are getting to explore the environment around them and engage in science, all while participating in real research projects that are helping us better understand how climate change is impacting our world. If you're interested in joining this robust community of citizen scientists, there are many ways to get involved. Educators who are interested in having their classrooms participate in the Schoolyard Ecology program can reach out to Catherine Hinkle, the current youth education manager for the program, and the person who I spoke to for this story. Trainings are held throughout the year for teachers, as well as workshops that anyone in the community can attend that are focused on things like data literacy and how to navigate the public ecological database. And if you'd like to hear stories from the educators and the student scientists who are participating in this program and making this research possible, you can read about their experiences by checking out the Schoolyard Scientist Substack newsletter, as well as listening to the Schoolyard Scientist podcast.
See you next time on Did You Know with Shannon Geary.
Support for the CivicSciTV Network comes from viewers, readers, and listeners like you. Visit CivicSciTV.org to learn more.
Water is life, and access to clean water is a pressing issue for communities across the world. In Pacific H2O, your students will purify water using chemical engineering. With 4 reflective lessons, this module is aligned to both US and New Zealand standards. To understand the importance of water across Pacific nations, we'll hear from experts, test for impurities and perform water treatments, and reflect on Samoan water proverbs. Students will mind map what water means to them, perform a hands-on water purification lab driven by a web-based game, and propose solutions to real problems faced by communities across the Pacific. This unit is about the importance of water and the challenges of providing clean water. From the water purification lab with 3 realistic water samples to heartfelt artwork by a Samoan artist, students will gain a new appreciation and respect for water's life-giving abilities. The best part, this lesson is completely free and editable thanks to a grant to Dr. Matthew Cowan's lab at the University of Canterbury.